Hello there. Welcome to Lean Lunch. I'm your host, Aaron Eaton, and I've got my co-founder, Brant Cooper, with us today. Let's see here, talk a little bit about Moves the Needle. Moves the Needle, we help enterprises to transform their culture into one where customer focus, rapid experimentation, and evidence-based decision-making drive continuous innovation. We also help your organization to move more at the speed of a startup. Obviously, a big org, you're not going to move at exactly the speed of a startup, but the closer you can get to that situation, the better. And really, with our programs, we help to deepen the customer empathy, accelerate your product pipeline, and infuse your entire organization with the power and the agility of entrepreneurship. We've got a couple upcoming events that I'd like to tell you guys about. On November the 14th, we've got another one of these Lean Lunch events coming up with Rick Taraxi from PyPDX. They're actually an accelerator up in the Seattle area that focuses on pulling in corporations into their acceleration program. So a lot of enterprise goodness there for all of you. Then on the 21st, we've got one with Chief Solver from Kiln, Greg Fraley. He's a powerhouse in the innovation space, so lots of good creativity and creative problem-solving tips from him. And then November the 25th, we've got a Lean Enterprise event for Toronto and a Lean Brand virtual presentation that we'll be doing from them. So you can check out all those upcoming events on our website on movestheneedle.com. And let's dive into our Lean Lunch program. So, you know, the idea behind this Lean Lunch is to have good in-depth conversations from employees and leaders that are actually applying Lean Startup Principle in their enterprises today, and hopefully extract a few good insights that you can help and that will help you and you can apply in your own organization right away. Man, I'm tongue-tied today. Can't get this all out. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our special guest for this week, Seth Berkowitz, who is the Chief Operating Officer and President of Edmunds.com. And Seth is responsible for the day-to-day operations at Edmunds, including wired and mobile website development, sales, and other critical functions. And in addition to his paid endeavors at Edmunds, Seth is also the proud father of 6. So welcome to Lean Lunch, Seth.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I know your time is precious, so really appreciate you making the time to share some insights with us. So first thing I'd like to do is just start off and give everybody a little bit more context about Edmunds.com, more the history of Edmunds and the sort of the journey to date.
Sure. Well, Edmunds.com has been around since 1966, believe it or not. So we're coming up on nearly our 50th year anniversary. For about 30 plus of those years, we were a book publisher, providing people with editorial information and pricing to help them figure out what car they wanted to purchase. And even in the digital age, that fueled our development for most of the last 20 years since we went on the web in 1995 or so. And it's just in the last couple of years that our focus has started to shift, certainly internally and now even in our external messaging, where we're saying to people, we've helped with the discrete problem of how you pick the car that you're most interested in and helping you figure through what make model you want. But we're now interested in also helping with the pain points associated with the car transaction itself and the purchase of the car. So we're moving more and more in that direction to actually try and make car buying a little bit easier. And that's been an interesting challenge to move our battleship. We have 18 million monthly visitors who consume over 250 million pages of content on our website. And for many, many years, we have had an ad-supported model, principally paid for by the largest car manufacturers around the world. But in the last few years, we've focused a lot more on our dealership business and dealer advertising. And from dealer advertising, we started to migrate into how could we make this transaction easier for people, and what types of platforms, calculators, or tools can we bring to bear that would actually help somebody buy a car? And so that's kind of what we're in the midst of right now.
So tell me, Seth, how did you get to the point of even knowing that things had to be done differently? Was it literally an epiphany?
Well, I mean, I think there were a bunch of causes. This is lean, so we're supposed to be talking about things that move fast, but I can't say that the diagnosis of the problem and then seeing the opportunities was something that happened overnight. The first thing that hit us was the downturn in the economy and the automotive industry in 2008. So we had trade receivables from our largest clients, GM and Chrysler, who actually declared bankruptcy and had to work on their restructuring with the federal government. So I think that opened our eyes to the fact that permanent growth rates in banner advertising on a desktop experience, maybe wasn't the thing that we needed to hitch our business model to. So I guess that was one wake-up call. The second thing that hit us was mobile and the shift to mobile. Now 30% of our consumers access our service through mobile devices, and 40% of our page views come from mobile devices. And mobile devices can't accommodate the same number of ads and the same revenue per page as we received in the desktop or laptop experience. So that in and of itself occasioned some rethinking of our advertising model. And then beyond that, there was just a world of opportunity. We thought that automotive retailers were underserved and that there weren't really any powerhouses in new cars that really helped consumers select their cars, making better connections between consumers and dealers. So all those things caused us to migrate into working with dealers directly, which has been a big boon to our business and a place where we see a lot of future opportunity. But we also couldn't just ignore what had brought us to the table over the last 10 or 15 years through our banner advertising business, and we decided to quickly rethink that from the ground up so that we could prepare for growth over the next 5 or 10 years with that model.
Yeah, so I think that's I love hearing that you can sit down and you can and see declines and know how to do something differently, and then go out and tackle that. Everybody's been saying go mobile, everybody's got to go mobile, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's a business model there. And so, do you have any tips? Do you have any advice on all of these organizations that are being told that their whole future is mobile? How do you actually go about figuring out your revenue from the mobile side?
It's a real thorny problem. I mean, the first thing is to really stare it in the face and to recognize it for what it is. So 30% of our traffic, I said, comes from mobile, 40% of our page views, but less than 7% of our revenue. So the first thing that you have to do is you have to say, we have an emerging problem, and stare it in the face. The next thing was to sit down and say, how could we be more efficient in our existing kind of desktop and laptop platforms to give us a little bit more breathing space to prepare for some kind of mobile future? And in our instance, we did that in the middle of this year. We kind of convened all the departments in the company and sat down and said, let's recognize the mobile problem for what it is. Let's also look at our desktop and laptop business and see the problems that are emerging from this mobile migration. In our case, what we saw was that with the move to mobile, our desktop traffic and page views are shrinking. And if you want to maintain and grow revenues, the bad habits that publishers get into is they just proliferate more and more ad units on pages so that they could maintain and grow their business. But over time, that has a lot of bad impacts. It has bad impacts on consumers because too much ad weight on the page and there's less and less content. And it's bad ultimately for advertisers because they're competing against more and more people and the performance of those advertisers don't quite work out. So I think the first thing we did is we said, how do we optimize our desktop and laptop business to give us more time to figure this mobile thing out? And what we came to realize was that there were a lot of opportunities hidden on our old wired experience that we hadn't tapped into. In fact, 40% of our inventory wasn't being purchased. And the reason why it wasn't being purchased was because we had failed to explain to our advertisers what the value was in that inventory. So we kind of leaned in deep, and went out to them to talk to them and said, well, why aren't you buying this inventory? Why is it that you're carving us up and that you believe that there's value on certain pages and not on other pages? And through those conversations, what we learned was that they were using rules of thumb that had been developed many, many years ago, and that those rules of thumb just kept on getting perpetuated year over year, but they hadn't gone deep on really A/B testing whether or not they could get similar performance on some of these pages that they were shunning. So we started to work with them on tests to show them that actually their ad performance could be improved if they would embrace an audience-based model where they would look at the habits of the people coming to the Edmunds website, look at the search terms on which they came in on, look at the page views which they consumed, and then use that to determine what their likely behaviors were, as opposed to picking a page that they had used to been buying and just assume that that page was going to yield performance and then just buy that page because they had bought it last year. So I don't want to suggest that it was our client's fault. It was really our fault for not explaining the value and running the tests to show them that there was a lot of hidden value in the website that they were losing out on. So over a very, very quick period, I mean less than 8 weeks from the time that we met in June, we were already out in our clients beginning to pitch our 2015 upfronts, basically telling them that we were going to collapse the 83 retail sales units that they were used to buying, carving up our pages, into 6 that were completely audience-based. That you could buy access to new and used undecided buyers who hadn't dictated through their behavior any clues as to exactly what they were interested in. So those are 2 segments. The next 2 are people who have indicated the type of car that they're interested in without actually landing on a specific make model. So we have a new type and a used type. And then we actually had specific make models for both new and used cars. So we collapsed all the retail sales units into 6. And then we basically said to our clients, let's try and pull all of the web data that we have, all of the search data that we have, anything that we could get our hands on, and segment our consumers in such a way that you could buy access to those 6 segments, and you'll get much more powerful performance by knowing that somebody's interested in a Honda Accord. They could end up on a forums page, or they could end up on an editorial page reading about something entirely differently, but you've already ascertained that they're a Honda Accord buyer, and then you could message them accordingly as they wend their way through the website. And the vast majority of our clients embraced this opportunity and allowed us to work with them to lead them to something new, and are very interested in setting up teams with us in the first quarter, because they've kind of taken this leap of faith to actually see how it's going to work in the real world with us. So I've been talking for a while. I'd like to ultimately get to there were a few clients who didn't take that leap of faith with us and really challenged us to think about things from a completely different perspective, and we had to pivot there too. But before I get to that, I'd just jump in and see if you had any questions.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess what I like about this is that it sort of demonstrates how these lean practices actually work on the more sustaining side, the incremental innovation side, where instead of just using best practices, you really need to go back and continuously experiment to see if there there's things that you can uncover even in your in your existing business to optimize that. And so the testing tends to be more around split testing. It's sort of a what we call a local maximum type of testing. And so there's ways to increase the business there. You have to move quicker though, and you have to not just rely on what, like you said, what worked last year. I also think what's interesting is that the way you've segmented your audience is really around the problems, right, or the pains or the passions that they have are similar, as opposed to looking at them as classifying them as, you know, based on demographics or something like that. It didn't really matter what their profile was as much as why were they on your site and what they were trying to accomplish.
That's right.
Right. So then when you went to, so go ahead, let us know about some of the breakthrough side on the other side and how you got to that point.
Well, there were a few brands when we pitched them on the model who said, it sounds really good, but we view the pages that we buy on your website, you know, differently than you're now pitching them to us. So, and I would describe these brands as self-described challenger brands, where in their mind, their entire goal, because they're smaller and trying to punch above their weight, is to break into people's mindsets and into their consideration set. And so they schooled us a little bit on how they think about some of the pages they buy on our website. And they said, you know what, we're actually interested in physical real estate and owning a certain page, because what we want to do is turn it into a hub for our message, and then we want to use other advertising, whether it be on Edmunds or on the web in general, to drive people to this hub to get out our messaging. And they said that they found it offensive to them that they would spend all this effort to drive people to this hub, and yet 3 out of 10 times, because somebody had demonstrated other behavior in how they arrived at that page, whether it be through the search engine they came from, the search terms that they used, or just the behavior that they demonstrated on Edmunds, that we would classify them as a consumer other than being affiliated with that brand. And they said our challenger brand status requires us to speak to the 10 out of 10 people that appear on our page, and we cannot abide that 3 out of the 10 people would see a different message. So we spent a lot of time with those advertisers showing them our data warehouse and showing them the tests that we had run and showing them the performance, to explain to them that they would have the opportunity to speak to these consumers for twice the amount of time and to have access to 2 times the number of impressions based on our new segmentation model. But what was interesting was that they, you know, I don't want to say they were impervious to the data, but it just strategically, all the data in the world could not have changed their impression as to their buying system. And I think it was a good lesson for us, and part of the lean process is to, you know, throw stuff against the wall quickly and then learn. And I watched my team, you know, about to bang their heads into the wall for a 3rd time, and I said, you know, one of the things we need to do is listen. So while we think that the data indicates that the model that we're pushing will yield better performance for them, we're not sitting in their shoes, and we don't fully understand the reasons why they selected their strategy. But there's only so many times that you can fight that, and part of our job is to be flexible and to listen. So for the challenger brands, we developed a completely different model, which essentially created these clear channels for them that gave them 100% share of voice on the specific pages that they wanted to create as their hub. And we actually took that out then to all of our advertisers, because we didn't want to prefer some over others, and essentially gave advertisers a choice, which is to say, you could buy our 6 segments, and that's our preferred method of selling, and we believe that it will yield the highest performance for you. But if you're determined to own a specific area on Edmunds and have that hub, because that's the way that you want to direct your marketing messages, we could get behind that also and offer that up to you in the alternative. The vast majority of our advertisers opted out of that and said, that doesn't interest us. We don't need 100% share of voice. We are only interested in the performance of ads and speaking to the audience, and any type of data that you could bring to bear in working with us so that we could figure out how to hone our messages, that's where we want to run. But there were a couple of advertisers who said that, we have this clear channel mindset and we want to own these hubs on Edmunds and we want to use that as a place where we could direct people. And they chose to buy in that method. And for a company of our size and for the dollars that were at stake in these decisions, using the lean method to get out there immediately with clients without something baked, throw it against the wall, get their feedback, come back, do it again, and do it a third time. In what is a very short period, over 90 days, we completely collapsed and destroyed and then rebuilt our ad model between 2014 and 15 so that the whole website will completely not resemble what was there in 2014, and the whole method through which people will buy in 2015 will be entirely different. And that happened over a 90-day period, which I thought was pretty quick.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's incredible. Can you set just a little bit of context for some of the viewers about some of the capabilities of the Edmunds teams that were working on this? What were some of the skill sets and mindsets that those team members had in order to create this story?
Well, when we started to define the problem, we brought 5 or 6 departments to the table to just talk about their experiences selling and servicing advertising so that we could really get to the depth of the issues and the opportunities. So, sales came and their message was simple, which is our clients have very few and very clear needs. They want a clear understanding of what inventory is available for them to purchase. They want to know that we're actually going to meet our predictions as to how much of that inventory is available if they put aside the funds. And then they want it to be performant against their defined KPIs or their key performance indicators. So sales' message was clear. The next people that came to the table was sales support with a pretty similar message. The other skills that were brought to bear was our advertising operations group, which basically said, hey, it's a nightmare having 83 different retail sales units that we carve up, and it's incredibly inefficient having whole portions of the site that are unbought and all the line items that have to be proliferated that could be done more smartly. Our programmatic sales team came to the table, and they had a different perspective, which was when an ad is not bought in our primary sales process, either in the upfront or the sales market, it now is sold through these programmatic kind of automated venues. And there, the things that are typically scooped up are IAB standard units that have a specific dimension and a specific size and specific creative requirements. So their perspective was important, which is stop proliferating these custom advertising units that don't have resale value when they're not scooped up. So that was a perspective that needed to be brought to the table. And I think the group that was ultimately decisive was the ad product people who were concerned that if we started to stack more and more ads on the page that they didn't have the magic to create performance without rethinking the model. And then the data analytics team, who came with all the data from our warehouse and I think that was the most decisive group to say there's a smarter and better way to do this. We can actually ascertain what people are really trying to accomplish on the website, and we could work to marry that data with what our advertisers' objectives are, and we could find new ways to repackage the advertising on the website in a way that will be truly responsive to the client's key performance indicators and really change the size of the opportunity on Edmunds, even as page views and traffic shrinks and as mobile explodes, that there's still all this latent value that's locked up on the website. The other piece was to then accompany mobile with it as well. So now mobile is sold in the same retail sales units that the website is sold on, and the creative units are exactly the same. So we have a number of box ads that we sell on our mobile site, because we looked at Facebook and we looked at the size of the ads that they're selling, and they're actually quite large within the stream of content. So we figured that we could do that as well and allow our clients to buy across all platforms using the same segmentation model. So we actually have pretty high hopes that we could start to correct the imbalance between our mobile traffic and the monetization this year as well. So those were all the skill sets that were brought to bear on the issue.
So if another company can pull together a nice solid cross-functional team, some lean startup capabilities, maybe some design thinking capabilities, that kind of stuff, they can basically shift their entire business model in 90 days. It's that easy.
I think so. I think the first thing that it required was some degree of leadership. There needed to be a senior person in the organization to say, we have a challenge here and we need to solve it. Pulling people together, they did all the work then to define the problem, and the second that people see a problem, they then get excited to solve it. I read the story about Larry Page in the new Google book that came out in the last half year or so. That one Friday afternoon he was tooling around and looking at search results and kind of pissed at what he saw. So he just hung up a sign in one of the Google lunchrooms that showed the query and said, "This experience sucks," and then left the office. And by the time he came back after the weekend, the problem was solved, because it bothered people that there was this problem. And I think we had the same experiences. Once it was identified and we stared it in the face, then the talent comes together, and are working with you, Aaron, inculcating the principles of like lean, and then it just makes the solutions a little bit faster. And I think the biggest thing is that people have overcome the fear of not having all the answers in front of the client, or saying to them, hey, this is an experiment, this is a thought, or this is a provisional plan that we have. Let's get your feedback. And it used to be that the thought was that everything had to be perfectly polished, and you take it out there, and you didn't want to show any kind of vulnerability. But I think what we learned through working with you and this upfront process that we went through is that our clients actually want to work in partnership with us and feel like they're part of the process. So rather than these very stilted meetings where we come in as if we have all the answers, we came in and said, here's a problem that we face. We know the issues that you've been having. Here's our provisional solution. What do you think? And that led us to this kind of like multiple-pronged model and a choice that we gave clients. And then people opted for what suited them and their strategies and their business.
I think that's really interesting too, because if you think about what you just described for your teams to do with customers and getting out there and not having all the right answers, but you look at what you did as a leader, or what the leadership team did in this case, right, was to say, hey, we think that there's a problem here. Bring all these people together. Let's get all the smart people in the room and try to figure out what is the best solution, and not assume that we have all the answers. You're actually applying, from a leadership perspective, you're applying those same principles that you're asking your teams to apply.
Right. So, and I think there was no real rocket science on our part, but we've stumbled into something, and we're going to milk it for as long as we could use it and see if it works. This thing was called an ad summit that we had, where we invited 6 people, 6 different groups to present for 10 minutes or less, like their perspective on the problem as it was framed. And then we then had like a capped 90 minutes of free-flowing discussion with the notion that we were going to rethink our business model in that context. So I don't think you could do that every week in every area of the company, but we've been trying to do these like 1 weeks around thorny problems or opportunities where nobody's quite grasping it or running with it. we're about to have internally kind of a used car summit where we're saying, hey, we've been nibbling on these issues. We've had a lot of really interesting pilots and tests. We're preparing for the NADA, which is the big national dealer association meeting that's coming up in the end of January. But how do we get everybody totally clear on the strategy and what the problem statement is and the provisional solutions? So we've been trying this kind of internal summit on thorny issues since we were kind of happy with the way it worked with respect to kind of rethinking our ad business. So we're going to see if we can milk it till it gets tired, and then we'll come up with some other way.
So is there a palpable change inside of Edmunds? I mean, so are people looking forward to the used car summit in a way that people maybe weren't before the ad summit? I mean, do people look at the ad summit and just kind of, wow, look what came out of that? And is there sort of this cultural change that's going on inside of Edmunds?
It makes sense. I mean, I think people like the opportunity to present in front of their peers. They like that it's cross-functional and that everybody gets a voice. They also like the fact that it's capped. It's like we're going to have a half day, and then it's clear when we come into the room that we're going to emerge with like a provisional, clear strategy. Not that it won't pivot 100 times between now and NADA, but at the very least, the goal of that summit is that we walk out of the room that, you know, all 6 or 8 departments totally understand that where we're headed, and that they make sure that they're on the same page. And it just seems like regular weekly meetings or you know, informal settings don't really do enough. Sorry, the light went out. Give me a second here. Don't really do enough to you know, create that type of you know, we're all on the same team, kind of pushing for a solution. And we need these periodic check-ins to just get on the same page.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a great idea. In general, though, I mean, I'm trying to get, you know, do the employees just generally feel more empowered about running experiments there? Is there a palpable change inside of Edmunds, or do you believe that you sort of always were entrepreneurial?
No, I think there's a change, and first of all, I'm sure there'll be some skeptics out there. I am the president, so you're asking me how people feel about it. I'm going to say that, you know, they love it. And everybody's going to say, who the hell knows, you know, we really have to talk to the people to find out what they think about it. So with that massive disclaimer and provide that I'm sure I'm blind to 90% of the things that people feel, even though I try and listen and communicate with everybody. I think Edmunds, you know, was innovative really early when we were a startup in the early late 90s and early 2000. I think that in the middle from like 2005 to 2010, between the distraction of the downturn of the economy, some of our thinking may have gotten a little bit stale. And in the middle of 2010, we embraced design thinking as a method to kind of break us out of that torpor without really knowing what it meant or where it was going to take us. And we've stumbled through a lot in the ensuing 3 or 4 years in terms of like, and we still do, in terms of like learning how to work with one another and how to create an innovation culture. And the place where I've gotten to mentally is it's always going to be chaotic. So now what we talk about is focus chaos, which is the method's always going to change, and we're going to create plans that, you know, get blown up like within 60 or 90 days, and we require these massive pivots. But we're trying to create a sense for people as to where we're headed, and then that we're not only tolerant of chaos, but that we're embracing it a little bit, and that we're going to really F up from time to time too, and we have the confidence that, you know, in the medium to long run, that's the only way to grow. And so I do think that that message is kind of being inculcated, and that people are embracing it and excited about it, and they feel like they have a real stake in the future of the company because of it.
So in this,
you'd have to check with them.
Well, let me ask about things from your perspective. So So as one of the top leaders in the organization, how have you had to do things differently as a result of this innovation shift in the company?
Well, a bunch of things. I mean, I think I learned through Lean and that whole method. Besides the technical side of it that people always focus on, the constant testing and the prototyping, which I'm not dismissing as being very important. The thing that I was really taken with on Lean In was getting out there quickly and out of the conference room and into the real world. So as a leader, I've taken that to heart, which has had an impact on my personal life and my 6 kids, where I prefer to be around a little bit more, to be totally honest. But part of the commitment to Lean In has been getting out on the road a lot. So every 2 weeks, like without fail, I spend 2 days every 2 weeks, regardless of other travel commitments, in dealerships around the United States. So I pick a city every other week and spend 2 days with my sales team in a dealership, just talking to my clients. And then I've now, in the upfront process with the OEMs, done the same thing, which was every week I travel to a different meeting, one with Toyota, with Mazda as an example, with Chrysler. Those are just examples to throw out, to actually, be there during the upfront meeting to kind of hear the client feedback, so that A, they would feel that senior people in the organization really care about these relationships and the money that they're spending and are invested in it, but B, also to kind of like listen to the specifics so that we could be more responsive, more creative. I think that is something that's changed for me. In the process, probably the biggest thing is I started to write a daily diary to the whole company. I couldn't really figure out for myself exactly with this chaos where we were headed strategically moment to moment, because sometimes we could be a little bit all over the place. And I figured if I'm having that difficulty and I get to see a lot of reports, a lot of people come to me, how difficult is it for other people to kind of see the general direction where this chaos is taking us to, and all these tests and prototypes, and what does it mean for our future? So I started to write a daily diary to the whole company, and it's just been a phenomenal experience. I'm sure some people hate that I'm spamming their inbox, but most people are really appreciative and then enter into a dialogue where now I get a chance without, it's not like a skip level meeting where I'm making managers suspicious that I'm talking to their people and what am I trying to get at. There's no kind of micromanagement. I'm not trying to get in anybody's way. It's just communication about where the company's overall headed, why we're doing these tests, what we're hoping to accomplish, what we've learned, what we don't know, and that it's okay not to have all the answers and for things to be provisional, and that we need to kind of foster that medium or long-term trust that there's a process here and that ultimately it will yield dividends. And I think people are buying into it.
I think that's an amazing insight, Seth. Early on in the lean startup world, particularly in startups, one of the criticisms of lean startup was that if you're trying to lead an organization, then having that vision and rallying the troops around that vision was really important, and that if you were embracing the unknown and appeared in any way to be uncertain about the future, that was going to that would adversely affect the culture, and that people would start to worry. And so I think that the way you've tackled that is actually amazing and a great lesson. That it's not about having, number one, it's not about having a lack of vision. It's really about keeping the communication channels open and demonstrating the progress that's already been made and the progress that's going to be made, and again, even exposing probably some of the big problems that are yet to be solved.
Yeah, that's been the tough one for me. Is if you're not honest, you don't have multiple shots at credibility. So the diary some days is downbeat, and all the leadership literature tends to emphasize the notion of you always have to have the answers. You want to project confidence. You don't want people to lose faith. But I've kind of opted, and I think the diary mode makes it more personal to say, hey, you know what? Some days I have fears also, or I'm wondering, are we headed to nowhere? And look, if it was like if I was writing that every day, I think that would be depressing, and they would probably bounce me out. But I have in hidden places where either we have a problem, or we did tests and we failed, or sometimes we failed in really big ways. Or sometimes we've had PR issues, sales issues, product issues. So I've kind of like had let's lay it all out there. The one thing that was a real risk there, which I'm still sensitive to, but I've just opted for the sake of transparency to just deal with it, is once it's out there, it becomes public. So most employees are well-intentioned, but there were one or two instances where I wrote something negative or downbeat, and it got forwarded to the press by an employee who probably was on their way out or wasn't as excited, and I've just made the determination that we'll just deal with that when it happens, because if I start to think about who the ultimate readership of this thing might be, then I can't really talk to our organization in a way of full candor. So I don't know if that's smart, but that's kind of the way we've handled it, and we're hopeful that in the end this type of communication will be for the best.
Yeah, my belief we talk about a little bit in my new book, The Lean Brand, but that sort of authenticity, I think, ends up being broadcast or projected out to the marketplace, is going to establish more deeper relationships with your audience than the one or two negative things that are leaked out there. So
right. Yeah. So that's been an interesting journey.
Very exciting. One of the other things that we talked about previously when we were prepping for this was some of the challenges that you ran into. I know that shifting the business model for a business of your size is not a significant undertaking. What are some of the strategic challenges that you ran into as you guys took that endeavor on?
Well, I think everything first starts internally. Is you need to get people on the same page that there is a problem, and then to seek the solution. I think we've trod over that ground, so I don't want to bore your listenership with doing it again. The next piece was really the communications challenge with our clients, which is to essentially admit that Edmunds is it's the #1 third-party website. We won the J.D. Power Award. It has 18 million consumers. Our OEMs have been spending a lot of money with Edmunds for many years. But we actually started the meeting saying we need to change ultimately for your sake. So I think that there is risk in that, going out to your clients and essentially saying that we can't continue business as usual, and we wanted to get in front of that rather than they be the ones to tell us that, hey, your solution's not working. So I think that was a challenge, which was to develop, I don't want to say courage, because there's people who do a lot more courageous people in life, like firefighters or policemen or other people, but for salespeople, I think that was a strange place to be, which was almost heading off a problem by saying that if things persist for a number of years in the manner that we've grown used to doing things, we don't think that you're going to be satisfied in the long run. We need to try something different. And then it was dealing with the reactions. A lot of people said, this is exciting. We talked about the challenger brands who said it doesn't fit with our strategy. But even among the people that said that they're excited, they also admitted that they have fears, like how does this fit with all the KPIs that they have developed over time, and how are they going to measure us in this new model? And how are they going to explain it if they're an agency to their client? If you're on a Honda page and suddenly a Chevrolet ad shows up because we've segmented as being a Chevrolet user because of all their previous web experience, how's that going to be reacted to? So I think that there are multiple challenges, internal and external, that both require communication and data and trust. But I think because we use the lean-in process and we involved the agencies and the clients from the get-go in laying out the problem and just saying that this is a provisional solution, but involve them in the feedback loop and in that process, I think they have shared ownership with us over what the future will bring in a good way. And that yields us the opportunity to kind of tweak and test, and we probably won't get it perfectly right out of the gate, but I think that we have established some credibility and trust with them because we laid out what the issue is and involved them in the solution.
So that's great. You're sort of a three-sided marketplace, maybe even more, but you have your consumers, you have your brands, and then you have the dealers. And if I heard you correctly, your relationship with the dealers is a relatively new one, or at least at the depth that it is now. Maybe you can talk briefly about how that came about and how that's actually evolved in the last few years.
Right. So since the mid to late 90s, Edmunds had a very small dealer business, and it was not even directly with dealers. We essentially sold leads on Edmunds.com, which were a byproduct of consumers coming to visit, and we sold them to third parties who resold them to dealerships. And in about late 2010, early 2011, we diagnosed the issue that A, we were completely under-monetizing the website by selling our leads to third parties. B, we had kind of strangled innovation because third parties could only resell leads, and so there was no way to really envision new modes of communication between consumers and dealers, because you could launch them on the website, but there was no way to monetize them because the intermediaries had no way to essentially arbitrage them with dealers.
Right.
And we didn't, and we saw it as this kind of massive growth opportunity. So we essentially overnight hired a sales staff in a couple of locales and canceled our partnership in those locales and had people sell subscription packages directly to dealers. And it was so successful from the get-go that we quickly moved to eliminate all of our partnerships, and we hired over 150 people in 1 year to kind of and support a national sales process of our own subscriptions. And for a few years, it became the growth engine of Edmunds. Through that process, what we learned was that consumers wanted more than just submitting their first name, last name, email address, and phone number, and you've got to give them more in order to kind of enable that dealer-consumer communication. So last year, in the end of 2013, we developed a product called Price Promise, which essentially gives people guaranteed prices on vehicles. That wasn't an innovation per se, because TrueCar had done it a number of months before us. But at the very least, it kind of got us to parity. And then where we moved from there was to innovate a new system of what we call internally a virtual showroom. And you could see the beginnings of it on Edmunds right now. In the past, you would come to a website and you'd pick a make, model, trim, and websites would show you average, what other people pay. They'd give you a review of the vehicle. They'd even show you inventory. But they would have no way to marry that inventory to tell you exactly what features were on the car. Over the last 18 months, we had this massive effort underway to marry what the industry calls build data with our inventory. And the results are these really interesting consumer solutions that are now emerging on Edmunds. So for 18 brands, you could come on the website and we'll show you the top 3 to 6 configurations in your area. And configurations is just a fancy word for what features are on the specific cars. So we'll say to you, there's 78 cars that have the 19-inch wheels that are in your area. There are 56 cars that have the navigation and entertainment system. And there are 23 cars that have neither. So you could pick from the comfort of your home which Toyota Camry you want of those three choices. And then you could get competitive locked-in prices before you go to the dealership on the specific car that you want, all the way down to the features. So getting into this dealer area has really enabled like completely new consumer innovations for us that we're really excited about. And I'll add one last thing in terms of the control of chaos. We actually have something that we're rolling out this month that wasn't even on our roadmap at all in the beginning of the year. It wasn't even in our mindset. We ran a hackathon early in the year, and a company called CarCode won it. And CarCode is a simple service that enables consumers to send outbound texts to dealerships. If you look on the mobile web today on Edmunds or on any dealer website, you will not see a phone number that you could actually text the dealership to start a conversation. We had an internal hackathon or an external hackathon. CarCode won a $20,000 prize. We then had an accelerator program where we invited them to use our website, to be in our office, to spend 90 days with our executives and our employees with periodic check-ins so that they could grow their business. And at the end of it, we bought them. And now we're offering CarCode for free to our 10,000 dealer partners. So on their mobile websites, there'll be a text number that they'll advertise that'll just say text us, and you'd hit the button, and then you'd be in your native texting app, and you could start conversing with the dealer. And the dealer could send you back photos of the car and could send you back Edmunds Price Promise certificates with the locked-in price that you could get that piece of inventory on. So we're just super excited about what we could do in conjunction with dealers and consumers to become a platform provider that really improves the car buying process. And there's so many things coming out of the woodworks now that we bought CarCode, other small companies saying, hey, take a look at us. And so we've also developed the insight that we can't develop all the ideas, and we don't have a monopoly on all the ideas internally. So we're really embracing the notion of more hackathons, APIs that we send out to the developer community to build things off of our data that we could then take a peek at. And then we'll look to buy or partner in places where people innovate really interesting solutions and then bring them to our 10,000 dealer partners.
It's just amazing to me that, I mean, we've covered a lot of ground here today, but just in the last 4 years, opening yourself up with these lean innovation principles has brought you wins that are both near-term, increasing the efficiency in sort of the more sustaining side of the business, the web side of the business, as well as opened you up to, wow, acquisitions, a whole new market with dealers, this whole mobile strategy. I mean, it's really pretty amazing how quickly you've moved in 4 years. Really amazing.
Yeah. Well, we're really bullish. We actually welcome competitors in the space. We think it's really sharpened our game and our thought process internally. We love the lean principles and just this concept of focus chaos, and that we don't have a monopoly on all the ideas, and encouraging startups to kind of like work with us in informal ways through providing them data and access to our website so that we can learn more about them, in addition to trying to innovate internally using lean principles. We hope that 2015 is going to be great, and we're looking forward to a bigger and better future.
That's awesome. I think that's a perfect place to wrap things up today. So I'd like to just say thank you, Seth. Really appreciate you spending your time with us today, and thank you to each of our viewers that's out there. Hopefully you got something valuable here. I think there's a lot of power, and especially for senior leaders, for trying to manage that chaos and understand that that's actually sort of a normal part of growing. I can't get my screen sharing to work here. Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties. There we go. Let's try that. There. So for those of you that would like to join us, you can hit the URL up at the top there and download a full toolkit that will help you apply a lot of the lean startup principles that Seth was just talking about. And of course, there's contact details for Moves the Needle, Brant and I, and some of two out of three of Brant's books on there. So check those out. And yeah, I think thank you for joining us, and we'll see you all next week.
Thanks, Seth.
Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. Talk to you soon.
Good weekend. Bye-bye.
Stopping.